Thank you all for coming to this exciting event. We're really thrilled to have this event in the library today. I'm Julie Harada, and I'm the curator of the Joseph A. Labadie collection. If you haven't gotten any food yet, there's still some in the back. I want to thank you to Pilar's Tamales and Angel Food, who provided the pastries. And I also want to say thank you to some of the people that helped us organize this event. Excuse me. Thank you to Gregor Langben and the staff and Stephen Griffiths and the staff in the library operations and AV services. Catherine Grabowski-Karula, I better get these. Audrey Banks, Jess Jenks, and Jalen Green of the Arts Initiative, Mary Morris and Ellen Pignon, and their team in library communications. And also I want to say welcome to the folks watching on Zoom at home in the comfort of their homes. And I hope that you can all enjoy all the food and make sure it's all gone, because we don't want to have any leftovers. I also want to announce that today is the birthday of Joseph A. Labadie. He would be 174 years old today. Just a spring chicken. And also Joseph Labadie was a very strong advocate of individual liberty and freedom, and I think you would have really enjoyed this. One of the quotes I pulled out from a letter that he wrote in 1927 was, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Labadie collection grew to quite a firebrand in Ann Arbor. I want it to contain the most radical stuff printed. So I just also wanted to say a few things about this event in particular, about the oppressions that have been faced by school and public libraries. They're often the target of censorship, especially in the case of sexual freedom. Academic libraries like this one don't usually have that problem. They get away with a lot more in the name of scholarship and research. So we have a lot more protections, and we can do stuff like this. It's really important during these times to try to build community and create solidarity and push back in support of our siblings and our coworkers on the front lines, and that's what I think we're doing here tonight. So now I'd like to welcome Christopher Audain, Managing Director of Arts Initiative, who is going to introduce our very special guests. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. How's everyone doing tonight? Well, listen, I know it's a library and you're used to being quiet, but let's try that again. How's everyone doing tonight? That's right. You know, we're going to see some very exciting performances tonight, some very exciting people, so we want to get the energy up, kind of disrupt the library a little bit. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Again, my name is Christopher Audain, and I'm the Managing Director of the Arts Initiative. I'd like to welcome you to this event and this partnership with UM Library. Special thanks to Julie Harada and her work on this. From the Arts Initiative team, I'd like to thank Program Curator Catherine Grabowski-Karula for her work spearheading this program, and our project coordinator, Erin Flores, for being our key event planner. You'll see someone walking around taking photos. That's Audrey Banks, also on our team, and thanks to her. The Arts Initiative mission is to illuminate and expand human connections, inspire collaborative creativity, and build a more equitable and just world through the arts. One of our goals is to expand access to the arts on campus and in the region, and we do this through dynamic funding and partnerships with departments and units across campus and in the community. Collaborating is key to everything we do, and it's wonderful, again, to work with the library for this event tonight. The genesis of this event comes off the heels of the success of the Arts Initiative Drag as Resistance event last semester. Did anyone go to that? Yeah, okay, welcome back. Catherine formed a committee of faculty, students, and staff who are passionate about queer arts programming and came up with the idea for this Dragademia program. Now it is my distinct privilege and honor to introduce Lola Von Miramar, a Puerto Rican drag queen who loves cooking in Lahore, Rajasthan, everyone's favorite South Asian drag auntie, as they discuss the radical and fascinating works of Lawrence LaFontaine Stokes and Kareem Kubchandani. Together, they will glamorously dive deep into the pages that uncover complexities of the art of drag performance that you will not learn about on RuPaul's Drag Race. Be sure to stay until the end. You might just be treated to a performance. Please please meet and mingle and enjoy your time here tonight. Again, eat the food that's left. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming our queens of the night, Lola Von Miramar and Lahore, Rajasthan.
Hello, University of Michigan. How are we doing tonight? Sounds awful. How are we doing tonight? I know it's finals week. I know you're all stressed. Thank you for being here. My name is Lahore Rajasthan.
Lahore, Rajasthan, welcome to Ann Arbor.
Oh my God, thank you. Are you from here?
Girl, sort of. I'm from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I'm Lola Von Miramar.
Yes, make some noise.
But I've been here like forever.
I hear it's been a long time since Ann Arbor has gotten to see Lola.
That is true. Definitely since before the pandemic, unless you're fans of Cooking with Drag Queens on YouTube, which is always available. The miracle of videos.
Yes, you've been captured. You're in the archive now.
I believe so have you. Is that correct?
I'm online. I'm on YouTube. I have a TEDx talk called How to Be an Auntie. You too can be one. So please watch it. You can pull out your phones, look it up, save it. Oh my God, this audience is gorgeous.
They are.
Michigan is giving. Wow. I love this. Thank you. Thank you for being so beautiful and arriving so early.
Well, it's been quite a year. Drag as Resistance last semester at the Necto nightclub, which had a fabulous turnout. Machine Dazzle at the University of Michigan Museum of Art, who has been talking and presenting and transforming. And now our very special favorite South Asian auntie, you, who are gracing this amazing stage on Harlan Hatcher Graduate Library. A round of applause for the library.
So, what you're trying to tell me is that the University of Michigan Ann Arbor is the gayest university in America.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm going to say yes.
Clearly, not everybody agrees, but.
Well, we were the first university to have a LGBT center for students in the early 1970s. Jim Toy, a legend in Ann Arbor, Asian American, Chinese American queer man, established the Jim Toy Center. So it is true that the University of Michigan has been a pioneering space, not to mention all the fabulous faculty and students who teach or study here. I know some of them.
Well, I thought I learned everything I needed to learn about the University of Michigan by staying at the Graduate, but clearly there's much more to learn. So thank you for this history lesson. But I feel very lucky to be in this library. I think it's incredible that you are hosting us, especially because libraries are such charged spaces right now. Libraries are under attack, books are under attack, specifically books about queer and trans people, libraries that host events like Drag Story Hour.
Story time.
Yeah, so the last time that Lola and I were together was in Texas.
At Texas Christian University in Fort Worth.
And they loved us there.
They did.
They really did. But one of the people who was supposed to join us in conversation was a Drag Story Hour host who decided not to come because they didn't feel safe.
because of the controversies about drag story time. So, and in fact, not only that, but in Ann Arbor, drag story time at Ann Arbor Summer Festival has also been censored, threatened by white supremacists, by violent people coming. So to be a drag queen in Ann Arbor, in Michigan, in the United States right now is complex. To think about these topics, to write about these topics, to talk about them is an act of resistance and why not revolution. And in fact, I think that's why we're here, to talk about these incredible books and the long trajectory of fabulous people writing about drag. Drag, of course, is a form of entertainment, but it has been written about.
Over and over and over again, especially pioneered by someone here in Ann Arbor.
Well, by our favorite Esther Newton,
Yes.
who wrote Mother Camp, Female Impersonators in America. So a big shout out to Esther Newton. Without that book, there wouldn't have been such an explosion, such a plethora, to use a big word, of scholarship on drag.
Say it again.
Plethora.
Plethora. Say it with us. Oh,
It
do you?
means like cornucopia. Or
Does-
buffet.
Buffet. I understand that one. Yes, yes. Speaking of, how's the food back there?
It
Great.
smells delicious.
Great. We're not allowed to eat till we get out of drag,
Because
apparently.
we're drag queens.
And our corsets are tight. Yes.
Tight. They might
Yes.
explode at any moment.
Yes. But I'm exploding with joy. But we're here to talk about two books in particular by some very interesting folks. One is named Kareem Kupchandani.
It's so sad he couldn't come today.
I'm sure he came this morning.
Wow. I'm so glad. What's the name of Professor Kareem Kupchandani's book?
It is called, let me get this right. Decolonize drag.
Decolonize drag.
Decolonize
Those
drag.
are really transformative terms. And what is that book about?
Well, 40 people in the audience have a copy. Can you tell us? You haven't had
Read it
time.
already?
Have you had time to read it? No.
That is so exciting.
It's a short book. You could have read it in the time you were waiting.
Isn't it
but
amazing that they just gave away 40 copies of Decolonize Drag and 40 copies
of
of
Translocas. Give it up for the Arts Initiative. Free books, especially free dangerous books, are really important. But I on the flight here, I took some time to read that book, and I think
You in first class?
no. Thank you, Arts Initiative. But I did read the book while I was delayed at JFK, and some of the things I think Dr. Kupchandani is telling us is that the art form we know as drag has been co-opted, not just by institutional forces like World of Wonder and RuPaul, and the sort of drag industry of nightclubs and companies and neighborhood associations that want to define what it is and restrict who can do it and where it can happen, but that in fact there's so many different ways of doing drag. And this is something Esther Newton also told us, right? That there's show drag and there's street drag and there's protest drag. And so Decolonize Drag, I think, is trying to extend that legacy of really opening up what we understand as drag and make it accessible and deprivatize it from the kinds of colonial aesthetics and colonized spaces and institutional spaces that it always is in. And I was really excited because I was reading 2 books on the way here.
2 books?
2 books. I'm a very fast reader. It's also called a skimmer. And as I was skimming, I was just really excited about how these 2 books were in conversation. So one was Decolonize Drag by Dr. Kareem Kupchandani, and the other one was called Translocas by Dr. Lawrence LaFountain Stokes.
Who unfortunately also could not be here this evening, but he lives here.
Does
She's
he?
a big queen.
Oh.
She's-
Do any of you know her?
Oh, good.
If you know her, make some noise.
Hey. Maybe
So-
some of her students or colleagues are in the audience. that could be complicated.
I love a complicated work relationship. Have you read the book?
I tried. It's a little bit dense. It does require some patience. But the really fun part, the part that I really appreciate,
Is the cover.
well, the cover is fabulous because it has Freddy Mercado, who is an absolutely extraordinary Puerto Rican performance artist. And she's really pushing the boundaries of drag way, way beyond simply an exploration of gender. Not that there's anything wrong with exploring gender, as our friend Judith Butler would say, but
Maybe you're friends with her. I haven't met her yet.
but it's a book about Puerto Rican drag. It's a book precisely about how artists engage drag in the most complex and unexpected ways, and how drag can be profoundly political in many diverse ways. Not simply as an exploration of masculinity and femininity, or the boundaries, the concepts of gender and sexuality, but also matters of race, issues of simply of what it means to be human or non-human, issues of racism, issues of language, migration, and community in the United States. So I think Larry LaFontaine did a really good job writing that book. In fact, it received an award from the University of Michigan Press for a faculty author. So some people think it's a very good book, although, well, the verdict is out. Have you looked at it?
I have looked at it, and actually one of the things that struck me as I was skimming was that both books actually tell us this message that sometimes gender is not at the center of drag. Sometimes there are all these other aspects of power and oppression and play and joy that come from our racialization or indigeneity or from disability, right? They actually shape how we do things with our bodies and how we're received by audiences. So it doesn't matter that we're trying to perform stunning femininity. People are going to see our bodies on different terms, right? They're going to see it through the way that they are trained to see race instead of gender, or race and gender at the same time. And so I think it's really important you gave this example of Freddy Mercado, who's not just performing gender, but is really disrupting what we understand as a body altogether.
Yes. And I have to say, Decolonized Drag also has a gorgeous cover. It's shiny. It's metallic. I hope you can see it. So one word that popped into my mind that I don't know how you feel about this word is intersectionality, or at the very least, the complexity about how different identities cross. And I'm not sure how you're feeling right now.
Well, one thing I noticed as I was skimming was that Dr. Khubchandani does not use the word intersectionality once. And I think one of the arguments that he makes in the first chapter is that, in fact, our identities aren't just meeting, but they make each other, right? That our race hasn't existed outside of gender, and neither has gender existed outside of race. And so that's all the way at the beginning of the book. But then he's like giving instructions at the end of the book about how to do drag. And he tells us that even when you're painting on a contoured face, you're actually reproducing race, right? We're trying to create a feminine structure and paint on these contours and narrow the nose. But in fact, the shape of the face we're painting is a distinctly white one, right? And so when we're doing gender, we are doing race. And if we don't see that those things make each other, then I think that we get stuck in this like, oh, we've got these different identities and we perform them at different times. No, they actually make each other. But I think that's his take on it. I wonder what you think Dr. LaFontaine Stokes would say about it.
Well, I think there is a parallel track in both books. I think that both books talk to each other. I think both books position themselves in relation to the explosion of enthusiasm regarding drag that has come across the United States over the last 15 years since the appearance of RuPaul's Drag Race.
What show?
It's a reality program led by this very tall, skinny girl called RuPaul.
Oh, chapter 3 in Dr. Kupchandani. Okay, I got it. Yes.
And
Heard about it.
RuPaul's Drag Race has overshadowed, in many respects, a much longer tradition. There has been drag since there has been humanity. Drag is a natural cultural expression. It is an art form. It is an art form that has been marginalized but also celebrated. It is an art form that people make a living by performing. And there used to be a thriving drag show scenes. And now the move towards the television and the internet has really transformed that. So I think that both of the books that we're talking about today encourage people to acknowledge and engage those productions critically, but also to make that effort to continue to go, whether it is to the nightclub, whether it is to the cabaret, whether it is to a Bollywood Desi dance party, whether it is a Halloween parade, and realizing, well, you just mentioned that Dr. Kupchandani encourages or even teaches people how to do drag. I don't think Lawrence LaFontaine went that far, but I really think that is definitely the spirit. The idea that drag is accessible. Not everybody has to be as gorgeous as we are. It's okay to go to the dollar store and to the thrift store if you're just starting your drag journey, because drag can be about exploration. It can be about entertainment. It can be play. It can be fun. But it can also be a very profound part of who you are. For some people, it is precisely the space of exploration for their multiple identities.
So you're making me think of something that Dr. Kupchandani says, which is that drag doesn't have to be about makeup and dress. And sometimes drag is just about how we use our bodies to recalibrate gender and sexuality and race. And I know that Dr. LaFontaine Stokes also writes about dance and drag. And I don't know if you remember that chapter.
I think there is a chapter on Javier Cardona, who is precisely a Puerto Rican performer who most people would never associate with drag because that is not his main form of expression. But in his performance, You Don't Look Like, which is exactly about being told that because he is a black man, he apparently does not look Puerto Rican, does not look Puerto Rican enough for people who have preconceived notions of what Puerto Rican identity is all about. So in that piece, the piece is a combination of, you could say it's almost dance theater. The first part is a monologue about frustrations about racism in the Puerto Rican media industry, the expectation that black actors will engage stereotypes uncritically, not acknowledging how painful, how detrimental, how destructive those stereotypes are. And then all of a sudden, the piece becomes a dance. And for Javier Cardona, that dance is the space of liberation. It is the space of moving beyond language, verbal language. It is that space of trying to break down preconceived notions of what blackness, what Puerto Ricanness, what queerness is. I love that performance. I'm so glad Larry LaFontaine wrote about it because Javier Cardona, who now lives in Indiana and has continued to explore the challenges and complexities and richness of being Puerto Rican, Javier Cardona is just simply an extraordinary artist.
So you talking about dance in that way, and people who are you say that Larry writes about Javier as being drag, right, and doing drag. Dr. Kupchandani, Kareem, if you will, also talks about how working class, queer, feminine men in India who are married to women and present in very masculine ways are actually some of the best feminine dancers that he knows. However, they're never invited to drag stages because they're not fulfilling the brief that a show like RuPaul's Drag Race has told us, that you are a boy in the workroom and then you're in full drag, meaning makeup and hair and dress, right? And he says, what if we considered Koti dance? Koti is the term for these feminine dancers. What if we considered Koti dance as drag, right? How could we open that up? And so, he's citing all of this work on queer dance that I think someone here named Claire Croft has written about.
Claire is fabulous.
Oh, you've met Claire.
Yes, I've had the privilege. Is she here tonight? Oh, how amazing!
Wow.
Hello, Claire. Thanks for
Claire.
being here.
Thank you for giving us queer dance. Thank you for giving Dr. Kupchandani queer dance. I think he's trying to say, what if we considered movement to be drag, which I think Javier Cardona is also doing, right? And I think that's really exciting. And there's dance, and of course we're always working with music as well. And I'm wondering, one, what kind of music you like to perform, and two, do you remember any of the tracks that appear in Dr. Larry's book?
Well, Lola von Miramar really is mostly about poetry and cooking, but the truth is that
All drag is valid.
all drag. Thank you so much. The truth is that, dare I say, Lola's fans have encouraged her to embrace the long-standing tradition of lip sync, dance, and music, which perhaps might form part of this evening's presentation. And Lola's very old school. So she, for example, listens to Carmen Miranda singing Brazilian sambas in the 1940s. She loves La Lupe, a Cuban singer who left Cuba after the 1959 revolution and was a master of bolero singer. La Fontaine, Larry, also highlights how some Puerto Rican drag queens engage the musical form of the bolero. For example, Jorge Merced in the Bronx, in his one-man show, El Bolero fue mi ruina. The bolero was my downfall, and engages and
Drama.
performs songs by people like Mirta Silva or Toña La Negra from Mexico. So Javier Cardona, who we just mentioned, he distorts and transforms a very racist merengue from the Dominican Republic called El Africano, the African, better known by its refrain, Mami, ¿qué será lo que quiere el negro? Mami, what is it that the black man wants? And part of this experimental tradition of drag is precisely recuperating songs, transmitting songs to new generations, using music to bring people together, but also criticizing songs, transforming songs, challenging songs, recognizing that music is extraordinary, but music can sometimes be problematic. Is that something you see in decolonized drag?
Well, I think this idea of repurposing the song to, in ways that it wasn't expected to be used is something that Dr. Karim talks about. And there's this one example that he gives of Miss Toto, who is a Chicago and Miami drag queen, super muscular, and the way she uses her muscularness as femininity, I think, is really spectacular. But he talks about a performance of hers in which it first begins with an explanation of who Harriet Tubman is, and then the song "I'm a Slave for You" comes on. And we don't expect Britney Spears to be playing in a song in a track about Harriet Tubman. But Dr. Khubchandani is trying to explain how a repurposing of this track in the nightclub, where humor is also essential, becomes really important. And then the track switches, and it becomes "Come on, ride the train," and it signifies the Underground Railroad. And Harriet Tubman, Miss Toto, jumps off the stage and looks for all the black people in the audience and brings them to the front of the stage to perform with her. And at the end of the number, she performs Carly Rae Jepsen's Runaway With Me and leads her black audience into a fugitive state in the nightclub. And again, these are not songs that were, these are like basic white girl songs, like Carly Rae Jepsen, Britney Spears, and she's turning them into new meaning and creating other kinds of space in the club. And so just the way Dr. Khubchandani describes it is really beautiful, just elegant writing, But I think it's really exciting to see how the things we know best can be transformed through drag and put to other uses.
It's so extraordinary that there is this tradition of scholarly writing about drag, whether it is people like Esther Newton in her pioneering Mother Camp, whether it is Kareem Khubchandani and Decolonized Drag, whether it is Larry LaFontaine in Translocas. I also think of people like Shaka McLaughlin in a very brave and fascinating book about drag, which is not only about drag among students at Purchase College and the complexities of drag in Germany, but it is also about Israeli drag queens using their drag to talk and critique the situation in Palestine. How does this fall into Professor Khubchandani's work on decolonized drag?
Well, one, he specifically cites Dr. McLaughlin's work to talk about an Arab Israeli drag queen who styled herself as a bride, never the wife, never incorporated into the family, just always at the cusp. And by using the bride, she actually uses that as a way of critiquing the state, right? The state being that which gives you marriage and says yes to your inclusion. But he also talks about how Asian American artists often exclude Arab American performers, and don't, they follow the colonial limits of what Asia is. And he talks about how Emigrate, who is a Burmese, a migrant, Emigrate, get it? Yes. Emigrate, who's a Burmese artist in New York City, curates a show called A+. And in A+, Asian Plus, she includes Palestinian artists and has been doing this before this moment, right? Includes Palestinian artists who get to stage their politics and their religion amidst a larger understanding of what we consider as Asian American. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, because here American Studies has always included Arab American Studies, and so I know we're amongst friends, but again, this kind of drag is so important. And again, we connect drag and questions of Palestine and Palestinian resistance and Palestinian inclusion with the library and the exclusion of folks who are not welcome in our knowledge forms, and books are burned and banned. And then we're here at this library that right behind us has an exhibit on resistance in Palestine and on Gaza. And so I just feel very lucky to be here and to know that drag and knowledge and books and our beauty can all coexist towards futures of protest as well.
I completely agree, Lahore. Thank you so much for your words. You're absolutely correct. As Lahore mentioned, the Department of American Culture at the University of Michigan is the home of Arab and Muslim American Studies. So, and being able to discuss these topics openly, having having students be able to express their viewpoints is a fundamental right, especially for everybody who is committed to matters of social justice. I do think that that is something that brings together the two books that we are talking about, and it is no coincidence that we are talking about Translocas and Decolonized Drag at the Hatcher Library, thanks to Julie Herrada, because this library is the home of radical traditions, of radical archives. The Labadie Archives, the Transgender Archives of America are in this building. So at a political moment that is so fraught, where there is so much hatred because of identity, because of sexuality, because of national liberation struggles, for us to be able to be here celebrating these two books, Decolonized Drag and Translocas, is really momentous. Can we have a round of applause, please?
I do want to change the subject and ask you something personal.
Okay.
Yes. Dr. Larry gives us this term called loca.
That is correct.
Are you a loca?
Oh, girl. Well, loca is a fabulous Spanish language word which is polysemic. That means it has many.
It has many Siemens.
It has many different meanings. It can mean a mad woman. Or crazy woman, but it can also mean effeminate homosexual. It can mean a drag performer.
Where?
It can mean a trans person. It can be profoundly offensive, but it is also a word that is used within the community. It is a word that everybody should be familiar with, but not necessarily everybody should use. So I think Larry wants everybody to understand that queerness, gayness, dragness occurs in multiple contexts, but in different languages. And those different languages, those different concepts are not necessarily translatable. There is something fundamental about understanding that loca, the same way that maricón, or that pájaro, or that pato, or that bakla in the Philippines, that these words are very specific. So I know you would like Lola to say, if Lola is a loca, that I'm not going to answer that question. What I am going to say is that, oh my God, well, at least 40 people in this audience got the book. But the truth is, if you're affiliated to the University of Michigan, you can access the book for free through the library. So maybe even more than 40 people will have the opportunity. I think you should definitely, maybe people here should ask Larry LaFontaine if Lola is a loca.
I'm sure he'll have some thoughts on that.
Yes.
But, as you're talking about terms that have been reclaimed and redefined, I call myself an auntie.
Girl, what's an auntie?
So an auntie is that person, that feminine figure who's outside of your nuclear family, but always seems to be butting in, right? And at least in South Asian communities, you will see a lot of negative stereotypes around aunties, right? And aunties are the ones who tell you you're too dark, when are you gonna get married, when are you gonna lose weight, you should try hair removal, right? And they monitor your gender a lot of the times. And my aunties did that to me growing up. But the thing is that when they weren't telling me what to do, they were doing the exact opposite. And they were doing drag when I was growing up. And they were wearing fabulous outfits, masculine and feminine. They taught me the wonders of wearing a kaftan around the house with no underwear. And just these are some really important life lessons I took from them. And so, I'm getting older. And I know I'm not the sprightly, beautiful young drag queen I used to be. And I just want to be an auntie like my aunties, and take that term, that stereotype, and, abuse the younger generations once in a while, but also make queer possibilities available to them, like teaching them how to do drag, right? Like lending them jewelry and boobs, when they need them, because they can't keep them at their parents' house, because they can't afford them, right? And so I'm not trying to be anyone's mom, but I am happy to be an auntie to others.
You're a fabulous auntie.
Oh, thank you.
A round of applause. I've been reading this fabulous gay Puerto Rican author's book, Blackouts, by Justin Torres, that just won the National Book Award, one of the most important awards in the United States. And it's really fascinating because this novel is precisely all about those intergenerational relationships and how this younger, queer, Latino man seeks out an older gay man precisely because he is curious about how things used to be. Not only before the COVID pandemic, how things used to be before HIV and AIDS, how things used to be before that horrible person who occupied the presidency and filled their face with Cheetos, how things used to be before Stonewall in 1969, before people like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson led this radical transformation. So being an auntie, which in Spanish would be sort of like titi. So I don't know if Lola von Miramar is a titi yet because I don't know if I'm younger than you are. But being a titi or being old, I don't like the word elder, but certainly understanding that there's this extraordinary heritage. And I think that is one of the things that drag does. It is something that allows for this conversation, which can happen through entertainment. So for example, scholar David Roman talks about archival drag in his book, Performance in America, how in fact, every time a drag queen does a song from the past, that song comes to life and becomes part of our present. So in a certain way, it's almost like time travel. It's almost like speculative fiction. It is bringing a different moment to the present and allowing us to embrace that, to learn about that, to understand how that experience has morphed and brought us to who we are today.
And there's also a scholar named Ramon Rivera Cervera who's written about drag as dragging, slowing us down. When an old queen in the nightclub performs a ballad and she slows the time down with her grand gestures. See how good I am at that? She really she gives us the space and time to reckon with where this song is from and where we are in time. And so this idea of drag not just being stunning and beautiful, but also about time and aging and memory and history, I think is so important. And I love that you brought up Justin Torres because he has written one of my favorite pieces of writing called In Praise of Latin Night In Praise of Latin Night at the Gay Club. And in that, he tells us about how nightclubs are these sacred spaces for all kinds of emotional and sexual and intimate exploration. But from what I understand, queer clubs are in jeopardy, even here in Ann Arbor.
Well, fortunately, we still have Pride Night at the Necto, which is in fact where many of us got to enjoy Monet Exchange. And who moderated that talk? Larry LaFontaine. Too bad he couldn't be present this evening. But we lost Outbar. So Outbar, which had been a long-standing for more than 25 years, had really been the epicenter. We had a Homoplex with the Jim Toy Center.
It was called Homoplex?
Well, we had the Common Language bookstore. So we are at a really challenging moment of transformation, which is interesting. So I think that having drag queens in the library and having scholars write about drag, or people, I've heard some people even teach classes about drag.
Who would do that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe Kareem Kubchandani and Larry LaFontaine.
Maybe. But you know what I will say is I didn't think that drag could be done in the library until I saw the lighting.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. It makes a difference. It really does, yes. Yeah.
Which is sort of why we can't really see you very well. You're sort of in the dark, which is fine. I'm sure we'll get to see them later.
Yeah. But should we ask them if they have
I
questions
think
for
this
us?
is definitely a very good moment to see if there's any questions from the audience. And we are multilingual, so we can answer in different. Si quieren hablar en español, es una posibilidad, but we can also talk in English because that way everyone will understand us.
Great. Yes. Is someone going to run a mic around? Oh, lovely. So if you'd like to put your hands up way high. Ooh, fast hands. I love this.
Hi.
Hello. Tell us your name.
My name is Dominique.
Dominique.
I'm a PhD student in linguistics. This is a super fun event. But I had one question about just sort of like with local drag and going to nightclubs, how to sort of make that accessible for people who aren't able to like leave their house because of like COVID concerns. So like if you had any thoughts about that, like that sort of like making drag accessible in ways that like everyone can kind of access, I guess.
I think there are a couple of things that that are important. One is that COVID has actually taught us many lessons about safety and disability and care, and in that vein, digital drag still persists, and I think we often think of drag in the nightclub as the correct kind of drag, but drag at the protest and drag in the library and drag in the classroom are all places where drag belongs, right? And even when we think about the nightclub and the ways it restricts folks based on class and age, we can't valorize the nightclub as the best or proper place for drag. But even before COVID, drag artists were teaching us that the digital space is important for drag because there's specifically a channel that exists. The videos are still online. Two Deafies in Drag, in which they needed the digital space in which to perform their drag, right, and in which to reach the audience that they were most interested in reaching, and also gaining national and global attention, right. So even before COVID, deaf folks and disabled folks were teaching us that digital drag is very valid drag, and those are some initial thoughts on that. And you know, I know it's so basic to say all drag is valid, but there's been so much foreclosure of what real drag is. So this is one of the things that happens in Dr. Kubchandani's book, is that he opens the book by narrating a scene in which someone says about my drag, don't clap for them, they're not real drag queens, when I was performing on stage with my friends. And this raises questions for Dr. Kubchandani about, well, what is real drag, right? And so it may be a very simple idea to sort of increase and expand what we consider the right place for drag. But yeah, digital spaces have been fabulous, and especially on Twitch, which creates these live streaming experiences that are interactive, is really exciting, I think.
It was really fascinating to see how drag queens started using digital platforms during the pandemic, because we all have to remember that drag is not only a form of entertainment. For some people, drag is their livelihood. Drag is how you make money. So for me, and even for Professor LaFontaine, it's been really fascinating to see the transition in that tradition of tipping the drag queen. So that for many people was a very as meaningful part of the experience was literally being able to go up to the person, give them $1. So at a moment of consent, at a moment of epidemics, all of this becomes more complicated. So all of a sudden being able to tip a drag queen through PayPal or through Venmo is quite fascinating. People are resilient, resourceful, and creative. And COVID-19 has not been the only pandemic that has impacted drag performers, the LGBT community. I always think back to the AIDS crisis and how people like Luis Alfaro and Marcos Cuilan Nazario in California, in LA, use drag precisely to educate, to share safe sex, to give out condoms. Having the drag queen give out condoms and trying to convince people at the nightclub who had other concerns, right? They were not thinking about sexually transmitted diseases, but to have them to a temporary pause, even just to acknowledge, even if it was just to put that condom in their pocket. So David Roman has written very insightfully about the use of drag as part of AIDS and HIV education. So I think that your question is not just a question, it's really an invitation. It's an invitation to people in this room, to people who sponsor drag shows, to consider, for example, immunocompromised individuals, how you might have a night or a show where it is required to use a mask. But also, I agree, to continue to celebrate. So RuPaul's Drag Race is wonderful, even if it is also terrible. The internet is fascinating, even if it seems like it wants to swallow up every other type of drag. So I think both of us, as well as the authors we're talking about, really advocate for the expansion of our conception so that there's many ways to do drag. In fact, Lola von Miramar learned how to do drag, in fact, by watching drag tutorials. I'm not sure she's learned yet,
I think she's gorgeous.
there is
I don't know
a
what you're
lot-
talking about.
There is a lot to be said for YouTube and Instagram and for television, for film. Movies like Paris is Burning, movies like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Puerto Rican documentaries like Mala Mala have really been transformative for many people. So a shout out to filmmakers, to people making documentary and narrative film. So there is a space for drag in literature, whether it is someone like Mayra Santos Febres writing in Puerto Rico, but there's a panoply, cornucopia, or buffet. Plethora. There's a plethora of drag. Other questions?
Yeah, I was just reading.
Hi, what's your name?
Oh, my name is James.
Hi, James.
Hi. I was reading the blurb, and it mentioned how AI and TikTok have led to like an increased popularity and interest in drag, but also kind of gentrified it. With like crackdowns on both of those, AI and TikTok, like legally, how do you think that will like impact drag artists?
Well, I think one of the ways that AI has shaped drag in interesting ways is face filters, and it's given people the opportunity who can't afford all of Sephora at once, right, to see what they might look like with a wing and a contour and a little bit of blush, right? And I think that, so this is similar to your answer just now, is that everything that AI restricted also opens up. But this is the thing about COVID drag as well, is that drag is resilient. Even drag, the bans on drag in Tennessee, drag is still resilient. It moves into home spaces. It moves into the digital world. People create underground spaces for drag that have safety protocols. So I've never been worried about drag because I think drag artists are some of the most brilliant and resilient. And I'm not just talking about the two of us, but all drag artists are so resilient. If you saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was this meme about that had a drag queen as a panelist on a table, but in front of her was producer, director, editor, cinematographer, sound artist, performer, right? Like drag artists learn all, makeup artist, costume, right? Like drag artists are learning all of these skills at once in order to stage possibilities. So whether AI opens up or forecloses drag, drag artists, we're gonna find other ways to stage our bodies, right? And experiment with our bodies and our looks. And so I'm not worried. Yeah. What do you think?
Lahore, thank you for mentioning Tennessee because I'm very close friends with Larry LaFontaine. He calls me sometimes. He knocks on the door so Larry was telling
I'd be
me
worried
that,
about that.
the news media just newspapers, journalists just started calling, emailing. All of a sudden, Larry had written a book about Puerto Rican drag, thinking, who's interested in Puerto Rican drag? First of all, most people in the United States don't even know where Puerto Rico is. They don't know that Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States since 1898. They think that all Puerto Ricans are either Ricky Martin or J-Lo. So they don't know what loca is. So who is going to call? Well, it turns out all sorts of people wanted to talk to Larry about the politics of banning drag. So all of a sudden, the argument that people like Esther Newton have been making for more than 50 years, the argument that Kareem Kubchandani and Larry LaFontaine make, is so it's not the politics of drag are not only the way that artists or performers can espouse, but it's literally the possibility of existing, the possibility of being. So I agree with Lahore that drag artists are enormously creative, and that every time there is a challenge, there is always a workaround. We have seen that historically in the United States, where there has been such horrendous repression of drag performance at different moments. If you think of the 1950s, of McCarthyism. So we are currently living in a resurgence of conservatism. I think this is the moment to invoke our trans ancestors like Silvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson and the other extraordinary trans thinkers who are really revolutionizing the university through trans studies, even at the University of Michigan and elsewhere. So it's a really exciting moment to be embracing and thinking about what is drag, how does drag do what it does, and what would it mean for each one of us in this room, either to perform in drag or to attend drag in many different ways.
Do we still have time for questions? Do we have questions?
Hello, I have a question.
Where are you?
Hi, I'm Dolly Tittle.
Is that you back there?
Yes.
Hi, what's your name?
Hello. Hello. My name is Dolly Tittle, and I am really interested in hearing more about drag as power and the power in choosing your last names, which I absolutely love, and the power of a person just transforming themselves the way you're doing.
You want to start?
Thank you, Dolly. What a wonderful question. Drag is empowering in many extraordinary ways, but drag also positions you in a state of vulnerability and potential harm and danger. So that is one of the topics that Larry LaFontaine talks about. That has been part of my drag journey. Simply recognizing how thrilling it can be, how transformative to change your appearance to perform on stage, to feed off the enthusiasm and joy that many audiences express, but also what happens when you walk outside. And all of a sudden, you're not sure if you're even going to make it safely to where you're going. So I think that tension is really at the heart of Translocas. It really is at the heart of loca and queer experience in the United States, in the American hemisphere, in the Americas. The fact that because there is so much violence, drag can be empowering, but it is tricky. Lola Bon Miramar is, as her name suggests, from Miramar, which is a neighborhood in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Dolly, are you familiar with Puerto Rico? Yes, Dolly is also Puerto Rican. So for Lola, being able to flag that she's a society lady from a very highfalutin neighborhood is hilarious, of course. And well, Lola is a name that I was gifted by friends, and von in German means from. And Rosa von Braunheim has always been one of my favorite queer German filmmakers. She made a film called A Virus Knows No Morals about HIV, which I highly recommend. So the influences that came together in the process of my birth and baptism as Lola Bon Miramar were diverse. How about you, Lahore?
So I'm one of those people who gets very annoyed when you ask me where I'm from because I don't have an easy answer. And so I just invented a place called Vajistan. Like Hindustan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Bangladeshistan, Sri Lankistan. After the French and the Dutch and the British cut it all up, I put it back together as just one big beautiful Vajistan, right? And so for me, drag has been empowering and giving me a place to be from when I come from a displaced community. And part of that also is something that Dr. Khubchandani writes about in his final chapter, where he says that choosing your drag name is its own adventure altogether, right? And it can be so empowering because it teaches the audience how to see you, right? And it teaches them, it signals to them before they even see you, they see your name on the poster, and they decide if they want to see your show or not, right? Every drag queen wants to be Amanda Play with, right? And then they realize that name's been taken like 20 times, and so has Amanda. But Dr. Khubchandani gives the example of a Filipinx Latinx queen who has named herself Untitled. And in addition to using Untitled as this way of disorienting how you might want to see her, she also paints her face all white, right? So she's refusing some of the racial signifiers that because there are lots of drag queens who are like Horror Chata or Jasmine Rice or Masala Sapphire, who are like signaling their cultural backgrounds and their racial backgrounds through their name. And so by choosing Untitled, she sort of refuses, as a mixed race queen, she refuses what the audience wants to place on her immediately, so she can do the kind of like artsy fartsy drag that she wants without being pigeonholed based on race, culture, ethnicity, religion, and all of those things.
In chapter 7 of Translocas, Larry writes about Lady Kateria, a diva of La Escuelita in the old Times Square in New York City. And that name was just so fitting because that chapter is precisely about how extraordinary, how dazzling, how overwhelming Lady Kateria was. So that was a really fitting name. And Barbara Herr, who is a trans performer who now really identifies as Barbara Hernandez, so for her, that is her new name. It is the new name that she has adopted. Hernandez is her family name. So Herr, when she performed as Barbara Herr, it was about nodding to her family. But now that she is in her late 60s. Now that she has a one-woman show called Transmission about that journey, how in fact for her, it started with drag and now she considers herself a trans performer. But then there's people like Freddy Mercado. That is his name. Freddy Mercado does drag as part of an aesthetic practice. Freddy Mercado comes out of art school, so not every drag performer comes from theater or from dance or from nowhere. And so there's many possibilities, whether it is using your given name, your family name, whether it is creating or transforming a hilarious or an engaging new name to name yourself. Any final questions? There's one in the front. Oh, people are waiting? Yeah. Kelly?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, this is Kelly. This is a half-formed thought, but Lola, when you brought up you could go to the dollar store or the thrift store to start your outfits, it made me think about how there's something aspirational about the femininity and culture and class around becoming a woman, right? And so designer clothes, Gucci bag, Prada shoe. And then I sort of flipped it and was thinking about what about the drag king experience might make you go the other way, the b-boy, the roughneck. And so is there something about class that connects to gender and our aspirations around that?
So thank you for that question, Kelly, which is there's several ways to respond to it. So I really have to credit my drag mother, Fausto Fernos, from the Feast of Fun podcast and the originator of Cooking with Drag Queens on YouTube, because it was really Fausto who said, who told Larry, if you will, that that you do not need to make a huge investment at the very beginning, especially when you're simply exploring drag. So it's not like, it's not like you have to censor yourself and say, oh, I can't buy top-notch materials. So anyone can do drag, and in fact, so that was the advice that I received. The advice that I received is, as you're exploring, as you're checking it out, do start with materials that are more affordable. Do take advantage of those possibilities, whether you are interested in doing drag queen performance or drag king performance. So I think that goes both ways, because thrift stores or even friends who can lend us garments, or now there's even like exchange closets. So at UMA for Feel Good Friday, in fact, people brought stuff and shared stuff so that financial constraints do not have to be a limitation. Of course, having a lot of money is really nice. Right now, you might be wondering, where did Lola von Miramar get these gorgeous breasts, which are so lifelike? Well, they are from Janet's Closet in Wyandotte, Michigan. 2 pounds of pure silicone each one. And why did Lola spend more than $100 on, what is money? Why did Lola spend more money than simply stuffing an athletic white sock into her bra, which is what she was doing at the beginning? Well, because it was a commitment. It was a way of saying, I want to bring my drag up. The second question about drag kings, I'm wondering if you, Lahore, have more to say?
I have so many things to say, so I'll get to drag kings in a second. But I have been doing drag for 15 years, and I have been using the same pair of winter socks as boobs for 15 years. So, there are different ways we decide to make our investments. And I think yours is the correct one. But when I sweat, they're very absorbent, so that's good. But around One is that I think Dr. Kupchandani reminds us that there are more kinds of drag than drag kings and drag queens, right? And he describes having seen drag icebergs from the Titanic, drag twin towers made completely of cardboard, and lots of drag made out of trash bags, right? And so, sometimes clothes don't even come into the picture at all for drag.
Drag animals, dragnimals.
Dragnimals, tranimals, right? Like there's all these ways of thinking about it. But I think you're absolutely onto something when you talk about the performance of class when we're performing gender. And this is what when I was trying to summarize Dr. Kupchandani's resistance to the term intersectionality, and rather thinking about the co-constitutive, big words he uses, the co-constitutive nature of social positions and social identities, is that when we're doing gender, we're already doing class, right? But it's the which class do we choose to embody when we get on stage? And drag queens are not always performing the high fashion goddess, but are often performing the sex worker as well, right? We can think about RuPaul, who started her career with a character that was a black sex worker, and then said, actually, I'm not getting the kind of attention I want to be a glamazon, right? And ditched that to do this, right? So she was doing multiple classes in her forms of class in her performance. And then when it comes to the drag king, yes, the b-boy and the hillbilly are common tropes, but so is the crooner, right? In the velvet suit, with the coiffed hair. So but I think what I take from what you're saying is that we have to look at class and gender and how they make each other at the same time, because and what that helps us see is that a certain gendered class becomes invisible. Who are drag artists not doing at all? And how do they make themselves invisible, right? What is the average white masculinity that makes itself so untheatrical on stage? And why does that not attract us? Because it's boring. But also, because it doesn't want to be seen, right? It doesn't want to be theatrical. It's like, look at that New Money performing itself over there. Look at that poverty performing itself over there. And in that way, by pointing in all those other directions, the most sort of average form of privileged masculinity and femininity become invisible to us, right? And so I think that's actually something we can study when we study drag. We should tell both Larry and Kareem to think about this more, right? Yeah.
Yes, and so one thing that jumps to mind is the importance of tipping performers, not us. I don't know how you feel. Maybe you also want to tip us. But we're in a library. The University of Michigan has brought us here. But many performers at the Necto or in other places, at Gigi's in Detroit, don't have sources of income, or have many sources of income. So being generous as an audience member can also be a way to signal commitment, to signal support, whether it is drag queens in Ann Arbor, in Ypsilanti, in Lansing, in Detroit, in Southeast Michigan, whether it is when drag queens are doing crowdsourcing. Getting onto RuPaul's Drag Race costs thousands of dollars. There's this expectation that people will have these extraordinary outfits, and it can be a life-transforming opportunity. There have been more than 20 Puerto Rican performers who have been on RuPaul's Drag Race, but it sets the expectations so high. So thinking about the political economy, thinking about how financial matters are related to drag, thinking about how class informs drag is a really worthwhile endeavor.
And if I can just say about RuPaul's Drag Race, some of you may know Farrah Moan went into bankruptcy just to make it on the show twice, because she went straight from her season into All Stars and was sent home early on both seasons. Whereas someone like Megami, who also went into debt on this season, who also went into debt, actually made back her money in online tips because people were so excited about her lip syncs on the lip sync Lollapalooza, for those who are watching this season. So tipping does make a difference in the larger drag economy. Yeah.
Mogami's Puerto Rican.
Hey, so
Larry doesn't talk about her in Translocas. Why? Because Translocas came out 3 years ago. But if there
but
was
in
a
Translocas too.
in Translocas 2, better and ever, or if those fabulous books that you, or those articles that you all are going to write, perhaps there will be really interesting bridges between decolonized drag, Translocas, and the work and performances of up and coming queens. Because that's the other very exciting and very overwhelming things I hear for scholars of drag, that there's simply so many that it is very difficult to keep up with each one. So you will see that in Translocas, Larry does not talk about every single Puerto Rican drag queen and trans performer because it would have been impossible. He talks about a select number that really illustrate a broader phenomenon and experience. And in the footnotes and in sentences, sometimes there's many hints to other queens, really with the desire, the expectation, or the dream that these projects will be taken up by other people.
And on the other hand, Dr. Kupchandani can barely talk about South Asian drag because there have been only 2 South Asian performers in the entire Drag Race universe, Jeannie in Thailand and the Queen Priyanka in Canada. So in that entire universe, South Asian drag just is not legible in a lot of ways, right? And this is one of the things we keep coming back to, is that some kinds of drag are just not understood as drag.
And that is precisely why, if you can watch World of Wonder, watching Canada's Drag Race is so fascinating because, for example, the way they highlight indigeneity, Two-Spirit, and
Palestinian
First Nation,
and
Palestinian.
Caribbean, Jamaican, Trinidadian, like.
I love Canada's Drag Race.
Yeah.
Do you all know, well, I don't know if you know, we're only 45 minutes from the border. We could be in Canada tonight.
We can be in Canada's Drag Race.
We could be, maybe that's the next place where the library should do a drag outreach event.
Great.
In
Stunning.
in University of Michigan's internationalization of fabulous drag program with the Arts Initiative. Can we have a round of applause for the Arts Initiative?
Yes.
For
And
Catherine and for Chris.
and speaking of internationalizing drag, I hear you're going to perform for us.
Yes. And I hear you're going to perform for us.
I'm performing just for you.
For me, I love
Yes.
it. I can't
Yes.
wait. I'm going to perform 2 songs.
Great. So you can go off the stage and I'll introduce you. Great.
And do we need someone to clear the
Yes.
stage so that I
We
can
could
be
use
more
some.
expressive?
Oh my God! Give it up! Give it up for our strong stage hand. Yes. And for all the and really thank you to all the people who have catered, who have taken care of receipts, who have mic'd us, who have lit us, who have projected for us. We are so grateful to be here. My name is Lahore Vajistan, and I cannot be more delighted to welcome to the stage my sister, the dream queen of Ann Arbor, Michigan. She is the voice, the glory, the shine that is Lola von Miramar. Make some noise!
Salve, salve as rainhas do rádio! Ai, 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 é o canto do pregoneiro que com sua harmonia traz alegria em South American Way. Ai, 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 e o que traz em seu tabuleiro vem de praia, oi, oi, vem de praia, ai, ai, em South American Way. E vem de es necesario. Ya conozco ese teatro, mintiendo, qué bien te queda el papel. Después de todo parece que esa es tu forma de ser. Yo confiaba ciegamente en la fiebre de tus besos, mentiste serenamente y el telón cayó por eso. Teatro, lo tuyo es puro teatro, falsedad bien ensayada, estudiado simulacro. Fue tu mejor actuación, destrozar mi corazón. Y hoy que me lloras de veras, recuerdo tu simulacro. Perdona que no te crea, me parece que es teatro. Y acuérdate que según tu punto de vista yo soy la mala. ¡Ay! Teatro, lo tuyo es puro teatro, falsedad bien ensayada, estudiado simulacro. Fue tu mejor actuación, destrozar mi corazón. Y hoy que me lloras de veras, recuerdo tu simulacro. Perdona que no te crea, me parece que es teatro. Perdona que no te crea, lo tuyo es puro teatro.
Yeah! Make some noise for Lola von Miramar. If you are on Instagram, make sure you tag her in all the video. I saw you taking footage. Make sure you tag her. If you don't, we will both sue the Board of Trustees. So please, please, please tag. Follow Lola von Miramar on Instagram. Follow me, Lahore Vajistan, Lahore with a W, because I'm here to work. And I am going to perform for you a traditional song in my native tongue, and I hope you enjoy it.
I am unwritten, can't read my mind, I'm undefined. I'm just beginning, the pen's in my hand, ending unplanned. Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you cannot find. Reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibitions, feel the rain on your skin. No one else can feel it for you, only you can let it in. No one else can speak the words on your lips. Plant yourself in words unspoken, live your life with arms wide open. Today is where your book begins, the rest is still unwritten. I am unwritten, can't read my mind, I'm
ਲਾਵਾਂ ਮਜਬੂਰੀ ਨੂੰ ਆਣ ਜਾਣ ਦੀ ਪਸੂੜੀ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਹਿਰ ਬਣੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇਰੀ ਪੀ ਜਾਵਾਂ ਮੈਂ